Objections are a good thing. Listen, if you're in sales, you want to hear objections. And yes, I mean exactly what I just said. Here's why. When someone objects, that means that mentally they're going down a path of making a decision to buy. When you hear the objection, you have to first and foremost understand it is actually a good thing that you're hearing it. That is at the foundation of being successful at handling objections. Understand? It's a good thing. So in this video, we're going to start to unpack the foundation and the things that you need to think about when handling objections. First, before we can talk about closing lines or scripts or language, you have to understand who your guest is. I want to bring you back to one of the foundational elements of TRUSkills coaching, which is the buying personalities. When you understand your guest's buying personality, you're able to adjust your approach, not adjust your process. Two very different things. I want to remind you of the 4 different buying personalities. You have the driver, you have the amiable, you have the expressive, and you have the analytical. Now, each buying personality has to be approached differently. We have to understand that. So before we can get into how to effectively handle an objection, you got to understand who your guest is. If you don't understand who your guest is, you're going to create friction when you try to overcome objections. So at the very start of it, you got to understand who your guest is. If you understand their buying personality, you'll be able to better navigate the conversation with the guest. And when those objections come up, you'll be prepared to handle them because you understand who you're talking to. Now, to effectively handle objections, first and foremost, you have to understand something. We talked a minute ago, you got to embrace them. Then you have to understand who you're talking to. Take it a step further. When you overcome objections, you have to do it in a way where you don't create friction. So the question is, well, how do I do that, Jose? Very simple. Oftentimes, it's by answering questions without really answering a question. So I'll give you an example. What's your best price? We hear that all the time, right? What is your best price on this car? And they're going to grind us and beat us up. Shocker. When you hear that question, you want to respond confidently. I'll give you like an example. Well, hey, Mr. Customer, the great news is I'm glad you reached out to us here at ABC Dealership because we're one of the most competitively priced stores out there. And I'll tell you, price is oftentimes the easiest part of my job. So I assure you, we're going to make sure you get a fair and great deal and that you feel satisfied with your experience with us. Now, with that being said, I do have a question. Have you had a chance to drive the Explorer? Oh man, so what I do? I answered his question. I acknowledged what he was saying. Then I asked, have you had a chance to drive the Explorer? I'm now trying to take them further down the buying journey. Okay, so I acknowledged, in a sense, answered his question, but I really didn't answer it. Now you're saying, well, that sounds great in this video. What about in real life, bro? Okay, bet. So let's talk about that. You'll have guests who'll say, hey, I appreciate that, Jose, but before I come in, I really want to know what your best price is. Absolutely, Mr. Customer. I'd be happy to provide that information for you. I'm curious, just so I can be efficient and effective in our conversation today, are you looking to lease, finance, or pay cash for the vehicle? Now what am I doing? I'm taking it one step further. You have to remember, when you're engaging with a guest, your goal is to go from point A to point sold. And in order to do that, you have to guide the guests along the journey without creating friction. So, now I want to repeat where we stand with this. When it comes to how you handle an objection, oftentimes it's answering a question without actually answering that question. Now, I want to take it a little bit further. Where people run into trouble when it comes to overcoming objections or closing is you don't build up enough credit with your guest. What am I speaking to? I want you to envision you have a checking account for a second. The idea behind it is this. With each interaction, I'm either adding to my balance in that checking account or I'm withdrawing from the balance in that checking account. Things like providing good service, establishing a connection, building rapport, right, are adding to the account. You're creating a credit balance, right? So if I do that, when I have to lean in, I have a balance to withdraw. Where people run into problems is you built up no credit with the guests and all you did was try and lean in on them and close them. But If I provided a great experience, if I provided value to the guest, if I answered their questions, if I served the guest, when it comes time to close and overcome objections, I have a balance that I can withdraw from because I've been building up that balance from the minute of when I said hello. To be clear, where people run into big problems is you start closing, you start pushing, you start trying to overcome the objection, but you've given them no value. And then you wonder why they're mad or why they don't like the experience or why they didn't buy from you. You have to remember a big part of it is building value. So again, let's tie this together on how to handle objections more effectively. Number one, you gotta understand who your guest is and what their buying personality is. That is absolutely key. That's how you know how to approach your guest. Number two, answering the question without really answering the question. My point is this: you gotta make sure that the guest feels like you heard their question, that you've acknowledged them, but you don't go too far down a rabbit hole and don't get to the next step. Again, answering the question without really answering the question is key to being effective in handling the objection. Now, we have to remember the next part of this that all ties together, okay, is you have to build a credit balance with your guest. You have to actually show them that you have a sincere interest in helping them. If they feel like all you want to do is sell them from hello, it makes it really hard to overcome objections and close without fracturing a guest. And that is how you don't sell cars. You have to remember every interaction I have with that guest is either adding a credit value, if you will, to that balance I have with them. The more of a value I provide to them, the higher that credit balance is when it comes time to close them, when it comes time to lean in to overcome that objection. I've built up enough balance that I'm doing it without creating friction. These are the first steps when it comes to effectively handling objections. The next part that we need to get into is really understanding, okay, when I have that objection, how do I ask questions that don't create friction? Your questions have to be relevant to the customer. If they're relevant to the customer, oftentimes you're not going to create friction. And oh, by the way, you'll get the real answer.